Brisbane Museum is now the home of one of the historic aircraft flown by famous Queensland aviator Bert Hinkler. The 53-year-old Avro Baby biplane has been restored and in future will occupy a prominent place in a special museum display featuring the Hinkler story. Hinkler's long-distance overseas flights had already won him a place in aviation history when he came back for a hometown welcome in Brisbane. He flew the old Avro from London to Italy in 1920 and amazed Australians with a non-stop flight in the same plane from Sydney to Bundaberg a year later. Now she'll be preserved as a monument to a famous flyer.
England's flying typist, Amy Johnson. She is completing the last stages of from England to Australia. Ah, she's waving.
I'm afraid that's the end of the Jason for a time. The right wing got terribly smashed in that crash, and the left one's also drooping. They're just taking it away now out of the way of the other planes.
On behalf of the government and the people of New South Wales, I bid the warmest of welcomes to the little woman of whom the Empire is proud today.
Well, I'm not going to make a speech. It's utterly impossible. I'm only going to say thank you to you all very, very much indeed for your hearty welcome. And I just love to be here. I'm so happy to be at Sydney, the goal of my ambitions. And now I'm going to enjoy myself. You've all done so much for me. And I just love Australia. I love you people. And I'm going to enjoy myself thoroughly. Thank you all.
Miss Johnson.
Hello, everybody. I seem to have got here at last. It's been a long, long time, but here I am, and jolly glad I am to be here at last. I bring messages from the people of England to the people of Australia, and I shall feel very, very happy if this flight of man can bring together people so far apart, but so near together in good feelings, fellowship and friendship and everything except mileage. If you could get aeroplanes bringing you together, that would be so much better, and get people coming out every week or so as I have done. That's nothing. I'm so pleased to be here, and I thank you for the marvellous welcome which Australia has given me. It's beyond all expectations. It's absolutely overwhelmed me. I'm afraid I didn't break the record, but you don't seem to mind that. It's jolly sporting of you.
I'm not going to make a long speech to you because I've got a terrible cold. My wife's ordered us to go to bed and take some eucalyptus. But really and sincerely, I welcome and admire and congratulate my old pal Scotty with all my heart, and wish him all the best of luck, and may he long fly and flap his wings and enjoy further successes throughout the rest of his aeronautical career.
When I came to Australia, first of all, I knew nobody in the country, and suddenly after a couple of days' stay, I was in Melbourne at the time, I found and formed a circle of friends who've never let me down and who've always been pleased to see me, peculiarly enough.
There's only one word for it. It is typically Australia. And I don't think there's any welcome to be obtained anywhere in the world of such a spontaneous nature as one is happy to receive in this country. And I can't tell you how much I thank you for this welcome, and how frightfully glad I am again to be in Brisbane, to be able to be welcomed by you.
Since this honour has been conferred upon me, I would here and now like to take the opportunity, on behalf of Lady Kingsford Smith and myself, of expressing our immense gratification and deep gratitude that His Majesty should have singled me out for this very high honour indeed. And now I'm sure that you'd be happy if I completed this little scene by presenting you to my little companion, Lady Kingsford Smith.
How do you do, everybody?
Here, a 25-years-old New Zealand girl soars down the skyways to Sydney, and so Jean Batten wings her way to triumph. In faster time than that achieved by any other woman, the plucky girl sped from England to Australia. Now she reaches her goal amid the plaudits of the Empire. The wings of this plane were given to Jean by her fiancé in London. So she reaches the terminal point of her great flight, flying on the wings of love. Now, Jean, come and tell us all about it. Just a kiss, my dear, from every woman in Australia. And every woman in Australia would like to deliver it personally. One does.
I want you all to know how pleased and how thrilled I am to be with you here in Sydney this afternoon, and to realize that I am so near to my native land, and I do hope that my flight will help to strengthen the great bond between not only England, Australia and New Zealand, but between all the dominions and colonies of our great empire. I would like to add that I feel that my flight from London to Sydney, which is approximately 12,500 miles, to my mind has been well worth doing, if only to receive this wonderful, enthusiastic and rousing welcome which you have given me here today.
Sydney's Hyde Park, the famous old aircraft, Southern Cross, is once more in the public eye, restored to the condition in which Sir Charles Kingsford Smith, Charles Arm, James Warner and Harry Lyon made their historic crossing of the Pacific from California in 1928. These are the original controls handled by the pilots, Smithy and Arm, and the compass that brought them over the ocean. But let's go back to that historic day as Smithy blazed a trail the great airliners of the future were to follow. His landing ground in Hawaii was a sandy beach, and takeoff was hazardous as the plane waddled under her giant load of petrol. There were no navigation aids, and many times the plane was lost as the navigators sought landmarks to check their bearings. But finally, the Australian coast was sighted, and the Southern Cross set a course for Eagle Farm just out of Brisbane. In Sydney, too, the waiting crowds cheered as soon as they could hear the motors. And as the plane made her landing run at the end of her 7,000-mile trip, the joy became unrestrained as people broke through the barriers and swarmed forward. The greatest overwater flight in history had taken 83.5 hours flying time, and a tumultuous reception assured Smithy and his crew even then of a page in history.
The young eagles of Australia sweep on. Always renowned for its magnificent marching, the RAAF goes to town with something extra special in this impressive parade. 1,000 strong, they swing along with lilting stride and a high-swung arm movement, which in this war has become characteristic of the junior service, which took such short time to climb out of its swaddling clothes. Fledglings, raw Air Force recruits awaiting the call-up swing along too. More and more men of this splendid type are required for air crews. It's a grand service that asks for the flower of our youth and gets it. And in the southern capital too, the khaki youngsters step out. 6 abreast, they give one of the most remarkable displays of precision marching ever seen in Melbourne streets.
Here are 150 raw recruits enlisted only an hour before the march. Soon they'll all be taking off for overseas to help make a mess of Messerschmitts. Good hunting, boys.
March the 2nd. World attention centers on the Bismarck Sea as word flashes that a 22-ship Jap convoy is heading towards Leh and Salamur. For long, warnings had come of huge enemy ship concentrations at Rabaul. Up to 60 ships had been seen, photographed, and bombed by Allied pilots. Shrouded by tropical rainstorms, the convoy was creeping towards its destination when the storm lifted. Reconnaissance planes got a bearing on it, and back at Allied air bases, the fun begins. In operations room, well-laid plans for a coordinated attack are finally checked. High officers of the American Air Force and the RAAF know exactly the tasks of their respective commands. It's to be the biggest aerial show of the New Guinea campaign, and more than 130 planes will take part. Zero's in vicinity. Well, we'll be taking along medicine for them. Scramble. They've been on the leash straining for the goal. This is anybody's fight. Kitty Hawks, Cobras, Lightnings, Bostons, Beauforts, B-25s, Liberators, Bow fighters. The latter do a grand shooting up job on ships and barges, crammed with Jap soldiers seeking escape. From bases further back, majestic flying fortresses climb into the sky. There's trouble brewing for Toyo today, all right. Kitties and Cobras scoot off to warm it up for Jap aircraft seeking to join in the fray from Leh and Salamur. There go the Bow fighters. Our camera is going to ride in one, capturing some of the most sensational pictures of the war. The cameraman must stand up behind the pilot during terrific dives and wild maneuvers, grabbing a shot where he can. This is no joyride. First pictures, a Lockheed Lightning heading for action. This great fighter has twin motors. There's a keen tenseness through all the air crews. A hell of a lot depends on what they do. A Liberator coming up from another base. Well, turn the lot on. The Nips have had this coming to them for a long, long time. There they are. Ack bursts around bombers there before us. Those American bomber boys are certainly doing their stuff. Let them have it, buddy. Now it's the Bow fighters' turn, scudding in over the sea at mast high level. This is it, boys. Give her the gun. Here we go. Got trouble enough, temporarily anyway. Let's find a clean skin. There's one. Not a mark up to now. Nice shooting, Skipper. They're feeling awful sick. They're throwing back plenty at us. Lead is whistling all around. Away to port, there's an untouched ship. The starboard are others, not so happy about the war. That's a fire they won't put out. Remember Manila, Hong Kong, Nanking, and a few others, Mr. Nippon? You'd better duck. Fighters are returning to base to refuel and reload. The American crews are bringing their bombers in for the same purpose. But as they come in, others go out. There's no rest for the unhappy Nips. Ground crews descend on the aircraft like a swarm of hornets. They don't get much of the glory. But boy, they do a job. Bombers take on their eggs. Machine gun ammunition is wanted in huge quantities. Cannon shells. That's what we've been pumping into those Jap ships. They're off again. But there are no ships left to sink. They got the lot. 22 ships in 2 days blitzing. 10 warships and 12 transports. There's plenty of work to do just the same. The convoy carried 15,000 Jap troops destined to reinforce Salamaua. There's plenty of them left, in lifeboats and barges dotted over the sea. There's a boat. Tiny speck, center screen. The bow streams down at terrific speed. Miss. One tiny boat in a wide sea isn't so easy to hit. More Japs meet their ancestors. Shows over, boys, and the ships are heading home. A bit of insolence for the coves in a neighboring bow, which is heartily reciprocated. And Torchy, the pirate, takes a victory swig. Good hard start, too. Water. The fighters are coming back with victory rolls. 55 Nip planes were shot out of combat, as many more heavily damaged. It's been a great day for the Yanks and Aussies. We have achieved a major victory, said General MacArthur, of such completeness as to assume the proportions of a major disaster to the enemy. And here's some of the men who achieved it. American bomber crew, grand types of youngsters who didn't miss a trick, and the boys of the RAAF who flew alongside them in a magnificent cooperative effort. Up in New Guinea has grown a marvelous spirit of camaraderie between the Yanks and the Aussies. They get along.
In Australia, we are now building the fastest aircraft in the world, out of wood. The wooden wonder, the cabinet maker's cataclysm for the Axis, is the de Havilland Mosquito. From balsa wood and plywood, the fuselage is made, and these woods are held together with cold water glue. There is no metal construction on a Mosquito fuselage or wings. These bands hold the balsa wood to the 3-ply, and another coat of glue joins the outer 3-ply to the balsa. As soon as it sets to a hard, strong wooden shell, the bands are removed. The half section of the fuselage is made on a frame and then taken for assembly with its opposite number. The two half shells are fitted together, and that is most of the body of a Mosquito. Such frail-looking bodies of planes as these have carried thousands of tons of bombs to Berlin, and carpenters can make them. The wing is in one section. The fuselage fits onto it. The wings are all wood too, balsa covered with 3-ply. No riveting required, it's simply done with a screwdriver. And they used to think making modern warplanes would always be a metal worker's job. The Mosquito is powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin motors. Just 4 bolts and 4 nuts hold each big engine firmly in place. Tremendous horsepower, harnessed by only 4 slim bolts. We never thought 5 years ago that we'd be building the top-notch fighter bomber with 3-ply and a glue pot. So Australian-made Mosquitoes roll from the workshop, a triumph of simplified manufacture, a magnificent new sky weapon for the RAAF. At left, Major Murray Jones, de Havilland's manager in Australia, and an ace of the last war. Now let the Mosquito prove she's the fastest thing that flies, the most maneuverable twin-engined aircraft in the world. With one engine out of action, it can still fly like this. Another remarkable example of the Mosquito's performance, coming into land with one engine dead. With top speed of over 400 miles an hour, the Mosquito has terrific climb. She He's too fast for the Nazi pilots to catch, and the Germans hate the name and sound of the mosquito. And now, in an Australian factory, each length of balsa wood, each strip of 3-ply, is a rod in pickle for Japan.
A £1 million factory in New South Wales is making these twin-row Wasp engines which power Beaufort. Production has been achieved in record time. Trainer planes, Wirraway fighters, and now Beaufort bombers made in Australia down to the last nut and bolt. Those with insufficient faith in their own country might write that in their notebooks and study it. There she goes, the first of a long line of aerial defenders, which will help to make these shores unhealthy for aggressors. And is she fast? Australia's 2,000 horsepower war effort.
This is believed to be the only authentic Lancaster in flying trim anywhere in the world. And as befits such a museum piece, it's been restored as nearly as possible to new condition by enthusiastic de Havilland maintenance men in Sydney for a 12,000-mile flight back to Britain. Given to Britain by the French Navy, who were using it in New Caledonia, the Lancaster had to be restored in Australia with money raised on Queensland's Gold Coast before it could make the long trip home. At last it's complete, and a crew of former RAAF pilots have volunteered to fly the Lancaster to Britain. The crew hope to arrive in England on May 13th in time for the opening ceremony of this year's air pageant at Biggin Hill, one of the RAF's wartime fighter bases. The big plane's departure attracted quite a crowd to Mascot, and as the 4 Merlin engines roared and the bomber gathered speed down the runway, it brought back many a wartime memory of squadrons of Lancasters heading out on bombing missions. The world's last flying Lancaster off home to Britain. The Royal Australian Air Force, 1971. It's the 50th anniversary of the RAAF, and distinguished visitors at the Richmond base are led by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Philip presents standards to 36 Hercules Squadron and 38 Caribou Squadron. In the 1920s, Australia's junior service was manned with 100-mile-an-hour Wapiti fighter bombers carrying 2 50-pound bombs and Gypsy Moths. Richmond was the first base established by the Air Force in New South Wales and is home for many of the RAAF transport squadrons in action in Vietnam. The Delta Wing Mirage, fast and hard-hitting, among the world's top fighter aircraft. Exciting interest on the ground as well as in the air, the F-111 is among the main attractions. Australia is still awaiting delivery of the controversial fighter bomber, and these American service aircraft go through their paces after making the long Pacific flight specially for the anniversary celebration. The wings stretch at wide angle for slow and medium speeds. Even though they're throttled back for the fly past, the F-111s come and go in a flash. Here they come again, this time with wings swept back, ready for full power. There's a crowd of about 200,000 watching the display of skill, and they're not disappointed. Now some action. Watch this precision bombing. As fast troop transports and in attack, the RAAF helicopters have proved themselves in Vietnam. Men from 7 Australian Air Force bases thrill the big crowd, and the finale is a skydiving exhibition from 10,000 feet up. After the long drift, the Flying Falcons land right on target. 1921, 1971. 50 short years of challenge, during which Australia's Air Force has continued to forge its own proud traditions.
History is written in the skyways of the Southern Hemisphere when at Kingsford Smith Aerodrome, Sydney, the Australian National Airways Skymaster Warana prepares for its long flight from Sydney to Vancouver and the inauguration of the first Australian Trans-Pacific passenger service. As the plane is made ready, the 10 members of the crew, including 2 air hostesses, are ready to go aboard. Among the 36 passengers are 8 Australian fiancés of American servicemen who will join their future husbands in the United States. The Skymaster, which carries both mail and freight, is in charge of Captain P.T.L. Taylor, Flying Superintendent of ANA, here shaking hands with Captain Ivan Holliman, ANA Chief. The passengers take their seats and they're all set for the historic takeoff. Total flying time to Vancouver will be 42.5 hours, with stops on the way at Fiji and Honolulu. Smithy and Ulm in the old Southern Cross took 83 hours on the first Pacific flight from Frisco 18 years ago. This service, which will be operated by Australian National Airways on behalf of the British Commonwealth Pacific Airways, will give Australia a direct air link with the North American mainland. More than 300 people gather to bid the Skymaster Godspeed. It's history in the making, the beginning of a chapter in air transport that must stand forever as a monument to Smithy and the intrepid pioneers who blazed the Trans-Pacific Trail. Their courage and their endurance was not in vain.
The Comet 3, first jet airliner to come to Australia, whistles into land at Kingsford Smith Airport, Sydney. The new plane has flown from London in 24 hours, 23 minutes, an average speed of over 470 miles an hour. It's the fastest flight ever by a commercial airliner. Like a huge, graceful bird, the Comet comes into a perfect landing. She's a beautiful-looking aircraft and will carry 58 first-class passengers. The new Comets will be in service by 1958. The crowd of 35,000 starts to surge forward. Police have called for reinforcements, and it looks as if 35,000 of them are needed. The crowd's so thick and they press so close to the Comet that it's some 20 minutes before the crew, led by Group Captain Cunningham, can leave the plane. In addition to the crew of 6, the Comet carries 10 passengers, including de Havilland officials. The new plane's actually outdrawn Johnny Ray when it comes to welcomes. Many are carrying lighted cigarettes, and they're pressing dangerously close to kerosene dripping from the million-pound jetliner's engines. Fire hoses are turned on to check the crowd. The Comet's home, and the crowd's hosed, but they accept a wedding with a laugh.
Kingsford Smith Airport, terminal for some of the world's biggest planes, flown by the world's major airlines. But they're not the only airliners which use this international airport. Here comes another airliner now. That's right, it's a Cessna, and it flies one of the shortest regular air services in the world. Operated by Illawarra Airways, the plane has no hostesses, provides no refreshments, and flies the smallest planes to operate regularly from Mascot. But it does make a profit. The Illawarra route is from Mascot to Bankstown, a distance of 10 miles as the Cessna flies. The fare is £1, about the same as a taxi would cost, but it's a lot faster. Passengers and freight flown from Bankstown to Mascot and return. A clearance from traffic control and off into the air again. The world's shortest airline, a boon to people in a hurry who want to dodge the city's traffic.
Air hostesses, 38 of them, arrive in Sydney for the 50th International Air Hostess Quest.
Some are from Australia's overseas and domestic airlines, and others come from Alaska in the north to New Zealand in the south, from Japan in the east to Mexico in the west. At Sydney Town Hall, Lord Mayor Armstrong meets Margaret McCulloch of Eastern Airlines and Carolyn Glover of Airlines of New South Wales. The 38 hostesses from Europe, Asia, America and the Pacific will visit Melbourne, Canberra and Brisbane before the final judging. The winner will receive a trophy and a $600 cash prize. Australia's Denise Renison of Qantas, but only the judges can say who's the hostess with the mostess. At Milpura, Sydney, the first of the Victor R2s nears completion, and the chief of the Philippines Air Force, General Pedro Q. Molina, is shown the plane by Chairman of Directors Richardson. The all-metal four-seater plane weighs just over a ton and has a wingspan of 32 feet. It will cruise at 174 miles an hour. The Victor will be mass-produced and sell for about £5,500. The undercarriage is retractable, and the plane needs a takeoff distance of only 220 yards. An Australian-made aircraft which could earn us money on world markets.
A new Australian-made aircraft leaves the factory for the first time, going by road to the airport workshop for its final coats of paint. The plane's a Victor Air Cruiser, a four-seater that will cruise at 170 miles an hour. The all-metal plane is a low-wing cabin aircraft with a fixed tricycle undercarriage. The new plane goes to the airport paint shop to take advantage of the facilities there. That shiny metal skin will look all the better for a few coats of colour. When the paintwork's done, the new aircraft is ready for its maiden flight, and the company's chief test pilot climbs aboard. The plane is only 23 feet long, but there's plenty of room for passengers and luggage. Now, let's see how she performs in the air. She'll take off after a ground run of about 600 feet. With a range of 1,000 miles, the air cruiser is designed as a private plane for either commercial or personal use. With Australians becoming increasingly air-minded, the new aircraft has a big potential market. A new all-Australian plane.
At Parafield, near Adelaide, Australia's first light aircraft show was held, and more than 6,500 people went along to see the planes. Among them were some 200 businessmen who were given detailed inspections of the aircraft in the hope that some of them would buy. The planes sell for about £13,000 and up. This plane costs $33,000. It carries 4 passengers and 200 pounds of baggage. A display of formation flying was a highlight of the day. That's a Beechcraft. The show was so successful, an even bigger one may be held soon. Australia's businessmen may soon be running their own miniature airlines.
A 42-year-old English shorthorn pusher plane, said to be the world's oldest flying machine that's still flying, gets close attention at Moorabbin, Victoria. Pilot Wally Bard settles in the cockpit ahead of the 8-cylinder engine. The crowd stands back to give him a fair go, and he's all set for the takeoff. The shorthorn may be a grandma to modern jet planes. She may be 42 and look like an overgrown birdcage, but she has a Civil Aviation Department certificate of airworthiness, and here she goes to prove that she still likes a flutter. Takeoff speed is a rip-roaring 30 miles an hour, against the wind, mind you, and in the air she can really hot things up to 60. Owner Fred Edwards worked for 3 years restoring the plane for a test flight. He took off and spent the next 2 months in hospital. Yes, she may not be fast, but she flies, and that's not a bad performance for an old girl of 42.
Right now, it's the ladies who are performing in the annual reliability trial for women pilots. They do allow 1 or 2 male officials to help, but for the serious work, it's the little woman who's in control. Famous aviatrix Nancy Bird Walton flags them away. The trial is a test of navigation, general aeronautical knowledge and flying skill on a set course of about 150 miles. Alert judges will deduct points if the lady pilot makes mistakes like going backwards or giving a right-hand signal and then turning left. Like some women car drivers, many of the pilots prove they're proficient. In this landing test, the aim is to land between the 2 white lines. Here's a perfect touchdown, or as they say, bang on. But the next lady in a tiger moth doesn't quite make the airstrip. But with an old-timer like this, we'll excuse her for hitting the tiger country.
The birth of a new aerial service in Australia, the Flying Doctor Service and the aerial ambulance. It's a long while ago now, but to the pioneers of the outback, it meant that medical help was only hours away, not days or weeks. It was literally the horse and buggy days. The planes would land on open paddocks and the patients would be brought from the homesteads by all manner of means. But they were tough people, these pioneers, and they usually survived. One patient at a time, and the old plane took off. It's a lot different now. The modern New South Wales Air Ambulance Service is not yet 3 years old, and it's centred around a trim, twin-engined Beechcraft Queen Air B-80. The new plane can cruise at 220 miles an hour, almost 3 times the top speed of the old-timers. In the first 2 years of operations, the air ambulance has flown more than 600,000 miles on 1,230 flights. This call is one of 2,917 that have been answered, and the patient is much more comfortable than patients were in the old days. The modern air ambulance is like an intensive care ward with wings. There's piped oxygen throughout, respirators, humidicribs, and blood transfusion equipment. Seated patients can be carried too, or there's room for a doctor to accompany a patient, or for parents to accompany sick children. At Mascot, the road ambulance is waiting and the patient is quickly transferred. The hospital is not far away. This is the drama of saving time to save lives. The drama of the outback. The drama of the New South Wales Air Ambulance.
In Port Phillip Bay, a helicopter and a Coast Guard boat demonstrate a new rescue technique. The aim of the exercise is to save a man whose boat was overturned. And it's a successful demonstration. He's simply lifted from the water with a cable from the copter. Up he comes, and while he's on the way to safety, frogmen are trying to right his craft. The copter flies over the rescue craft and gently lowers the victim. A man saved from the water by air.
The old DC-3. She's been called many names, none of them unkind, but as the old workhorse of the sky, she'll probably be best remembered. 2 flight captains from Airlines of New South Wales now have a nominal lease on Australia's last old-timer, and they're putting her out to pasture where she'll be on public display. In 1946, she was on the Australian run for ANA, and those were the days when commercial air travel was still an adventure. But the life of this particular aircraft started as far back as 1937, when she came off the Douglas Aircraft Corporation assembly line in Santa Monica, California. Her wartime role for Australia and the United States in New Guinea in World War II helped build the DC-3 image that's never been tarnished. Old VH ANR was often hit, but she always got back, somehow. After the war, renamed Oana, the old girl performed reliably through Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales, coping with flood and famine. Now Australia's oldest DC-3 and one of the last of its kind takes off for the last time. For safety and reliability, she's won a place of her own in aviation history.